let's take a walk along Pompeii's main street. The city stirs to life at the break of dawn. By noon, the people are out and about town, and the street is bustling with activity. Two wine shops stand side by side. Next to them is a fabric store. The wine shops are already crowded during the day. Fruit stores sell peaches that have been brought all the way from Persia. Over 400 stores have been excavated so far. The wine shops are still open after dark. They, in fact, remain open all night to serve customers around the clock. The people of Pompeii fully indulged in the comforts of their affluent lifestyle. At the height of prosperity, however, there are indications that changes were on the way. This grand mansion is located at the center of the city. It was the home of the mayor of Pompeii, who stood above all other citizens and governed the city. His name was Gaius Julius Polybius. Professor Masanori Aoyagi of the University of Tokyo has been studying this house for 7 years. He found an inscription on one of its walls.
Well, this is it. He wrote his initials here on the wall of his own house. G. Gaius Iulius P. Polybius. In the same manner as they appear in his election campaign slogans, and then wrote Dio Viri next to it. It means that he became one of the two joint municipal magistrates, and he announced it proudly by writing it on his own house at the most conspicuous place on the wall in the inner courtyard. He seems to have been very happy about his appointment.
This is the eloquent voice of a man thrilled with his electoral victory. 2,000 years ago, Pompeii already had elections. The name of Gaius Julius Polybius appears on the city streets, too.
Look, there they are. The letters GIP, the initials of Gaius Julius Polybius, along with the word Duvier, to announce his candidacy for the position of a joint city magistrate. This is an election campaign poster. Look, there are other names too. 1, 2, 3, 4. There were at least 5 candidates. In Japan today, individual candidates arrange their campaign posters next to each other on plywood panels. This is basically the same system.
Why were these city leaders so enthusiastic about the election? A speech of the 4th Roman Emperor, Claudius, hints at a possible reason. It states that the residents of provinces can receive imperial government appointments in Rome for outstanding service to the empire. The Roman Empire was a pyramid-like society, with the emperor at its apex. Below the emperor were the senatorial class, the equestrian class, and the commoners. However, even a commoner from far-flung provinces could be elevated to privileged status and become an equestrian or a senator on the basis of distinguished accomplishment. The easiest way for a distinguished denizen of the provinces to draw the central government's attention to his achievements was by becoming a municipal magistrate. To this end, leading members of provincial society engaged in vigorous election campaigns. Gaius Julius Polybius seems to have used various tactics to win the election.
An inscription says Gaius Julius Polybius offered bread to the citizenry for his own honor. One might ask, wasn't this dishonest? We would consider such action bribery today. But it wasn't like that in ancient Rome. In those days, every candidate eagerly sought to buy voters. Each one of them invited all the citizens of Pompeii to gladiatorial shows. They all distributed bread and held many parties. There were no regulations against bribery. Candidates hoped to gain votes by impressing upon their fellow citizens that they were wealthy enough to afford such lavish treatment, and that they would thus be able to make a great contribution to the city.
To win elections and achieve higher position in imperial government, candidates had to gain public support, so they competed with each other, offering food and entertainment to the citizens at their own expense. As a result, the provincial versions of bread and circuses became ever more extravagant. Rome, the imperial capital. In 54 AD, a young man ascended to the throne. His name was Nero, and he would become known as the Tyrant. He was only 17 when he became emperor. During his reign, the practice of bread and circuses escalated dramatically. Given the immense wealth of the empire, Nero indulged in every luxury. He built a magnificent palace in the center of Rome. It was so immense that it could contain the entire city of Pompeii. According to the ancient Roman biographer Suetonius, entire walls of Nero's palace were covered in gold leaf. Nero held lavish banquets every night, where he treated his guests to sumptuous meals and wine. He also himself into organizing shows of gladiatorial combat. He built a colossal arena where bloody shows were staged on more than 100 days a year. The shows became increasingly cruel to satisfy the spectators' seemingly insatiable craving for ever greater thrills. Among the artifacts from this period, there's a silver goblet unearthed near Pompeii that suggests the Roman view of life. It's engraved with skeletons and a verse. There is no greater treasure than pleasure. Tomorrow being uncertain, enjoy your life as if there were no tomorrow. Life in Pompeii was beginning to change too.
This is a summer dining room where dinner parties and banquets were held at night. Scholars have labeled the house where it's located the House of the Moralists. because its owner thought it advisable to write the rules of proper conduct on the walls of the dining room to curb bad manners and indecency at his feast. The rules are simple. Do not bully other guests. Do not make lecherous passes at another man's wife. Do not utter vulgarities. Refrain from soiling your underwear. These rules were intended to restrain the uninhibited behavior of his guests, because they often went overboard and committed improprieties during banquets.
People were becoming excessively indulgent in their pleasures. An uncovered mosaic illustrates this tendency quite well.
Here we have a very beautiful mosaic. It covered the dining room floor in a luxurious house owned by wealthy proprietors. The mosaic is called the Unswept House, Casa Non Scopata.
The mosaic depicts some pretty odd things. This is a bone with some meat still left on it. 3 grapes left on the vine. There are crab legs, a half-eaten sea urchin. These are all leftovers of a lavish meal.
The design of this mosaic is very functional. It depicts the things that were actually found on the dining room floors in Roman houses. The Romans did not use knives and forks. They ate with their hands and threw the leftovers on the floor. These depictions are very skillful. Even shadows were added so that they look real. Leftovers were swept from dining room floors by family slaves, but in this house, even if some waste remained unswept, the floor mosaic concealed it.
This fresco is a pictorial rendition of a banquet in Pompeii. A man is vomiting right next to other guests. Retching was quite common at ancient Roman banquets, where diners are known to have used bird feathers to tickle their throats and induce vomiting, so that they could continue consuming the scrumptious food. A graffiti has been scratched into the fresco. It proclaims, "I drink." People's desire for even more luxury and pleasure seemed to have no end. At the same time, the society of Pompeii was undergoing a serious transformation.
Still immature.
These 2 Australian anthropologists, Dr. Mathieu Henneberg and his wife, Dr. Renata Henneberg, from the University of Adelaide, discovered great disparities in the healing of fractures among human bone samples of this time.
Plates that sit between the shaft and the end of the bone here.
And here finally is a femur of a man who, when you look at it quickly, does not actually differ much from a healthy, unbroken bone. When we look at the back, we can notice that this bone is a bit unusual in this region. So there is some sign of healing. Here is a femur. That is the upper part. This is the lower part. The bone was broken in the middle, and the leg eventually naturally healed, but shortened by about that much, about 5 centimeters, and therefore this person, for the rest of her life, walked with a severe limp that caused the asymmetry to the pelvis and bent to her back, and so on and so on, could have had a number of other consequences.
Despite equal public services, disparities among Roman citizens were evident.
So we have a very modern approach to orthopedic surgery here, but obviously it wasn't applied to everyone. So like today, some people could afford better medical care than others. It just depended on the money.
The differences between Pompeii's rich and poor had in fact become quite large. This is sometimes attributed to the bread and games. Thanks to the government-supplied bread, people could live without worries about food. As a result, they had plenty of leisure time, but many didn't quite know what to do with it. Some people got busy making their life more comfortable and affluent. Others were content with their present status and merely wasted their time living for the pleasure of the moment. The income gap gradually widened, creating a significant disparity between the rich and the poor. Games had been devised to guarantee general well-being and provide everyone with equal benefits. Instead, it ended up causing disparities among equals. On the outer wall of a residence that faces the main street in Pompeii, there is a written announcement. House to let. Elegant bathroom, shop with attached sleeping quarters, available from August 1st. The circumstances of some of the city residents apparently became strained enough to force them to rent out parts of their houses. The gap between the privileged and the destitute was widening irreversibly. At the time when the dominance of the Roman Empire was at a zenith, corruption and depravity were thriving in the shadow of its opulence. Signs of discontent and belligerence are etched into the city walls.
Woe betide you. May your dirty wound-discharging pus reopen and fester even more.
In 59 AD, there was a horrific incident. It took place at the amphitheater built on the outskirts of Pompeii. This fresco depicts what happened. A violent clash took place between the people of Pompeii and neighboring Nuceria. It shows men fighting both within and outside the arena. According to the Roman historian Tacitus, the excitement during a show featuring gladiator fights turned to violence when spectators from the two cities began throwing rocks. Before long, they were drawing swords and killing each other. It all ended in terrible bloodshed. The gory incident occurred some 100 years after the founding of the Roman Empire, during its most active era. A graffiti from around this time still remains on a wall in the vicinity of the amphitheater.
This inscription is almost impossible to read. I can make out only a few words. Fecistis Cretaria, fecistis salsamentaria. In its entirety, it's more than 7 feet long. It's a hard-hearted look at one's own reduced circumstances. It says, you have failed 8 times, but you could have failed 16 times. You've drifted from job to job, innkeeper, baker, farmer, bookbinder, pot seller, junk dealer. You've done it all. Now, you're a potmaker's hand. Where are you headed? While full of self-scorn, the inscription also exposes the grim conditions at the lower end of the social scale. People are struck by misfortune and reduced to poverty back then, just as they are today. The writing on the walls of Pompeii make this quite clear.
August 24th, 79 AD. According to records, it was a sunny morning. As on any other typical day in Pompeii, the city was teeming with activity. The streets were crowded with people. Horse-drawn carts loaded with cargo from all over the empire were passing through. Then, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, on the counter of a fast food pub, a few coins remain exactly where someone had put them down. Perhaps a customer had quickly paid the bill and rushed out to escape. The posh room in a grand mansion is empty. A man who may be the owner had collapsed on the staircase adjoining the dining room. The figure of this frail woman was found in the dark servants' quarters of a house on the outskirts of the city where she had run out of strength. Similarly, many of Pompeii's other residents died, asphyxiated by volcanic ash. And the city of Pompeii, the ancient city that reflected both the dazzling and the grim facets of the Roman Empire, remains frozen in time as well.